Hello, this is Jordan McIntyre. I will be reviewing the text College Student Mental Health Counseling, a Developmental Approach by Suzanne Degas-White and Christine Barzumato-Gainey. This text really focuses on how individuals of the college-age population develop into adulthood. The authors highlight areas that are specific to this new generation of college students, while exhibiting truths that seem to be transcendent for this age group in general. This means the areas of development that seem to apply to college students no matter what time in history they are in. The authors break this text down into 3 sections. The first section is the developmental issues. This is where they really dive into the developmental processes faced by this age group. This section breaks down these areas of development by school year, explaining that what might be true developmentally for a senior is most likely not true for a freshman or sophomore. The author remarks that the experiences of each class differ from one another and have their own sets of developmental milestones and impasses. This first section can really be summarized as the explanation of the inner development of college students and how those influence their response to the external transitions faced while at college. Section 2 is called Social, Cultural, and Relational Challenges on Campus. This section is very much so focused on those external transitions college students are faced with. The authors focus on identity development as a key component of this section. Students enter into college, which is a time of extreme identity development, with pre-existing values, beliefs, and ideas of who they are. College is a time where these values, beliefs, and ideas of identity are constantly challenged and reimagined. Some of these external transitions would include grief over the loss of significant others, difficulties with self-esteem and self-image, which can be brought about by the competitive nature of college women, and also navigating through relationships and friendships that tend to be more intense than they were in high school. The third section is titled Clinical Issues in College Settings. This section deals with mental health issues that are facing the college population. Some of these issues include eating disorders, depression, substance abuse and dependence, anxiety, self-injury, and suicide. The authors present this section from a mental health perspective by exhibiting how symptoms of each of these issues would manifest themselves in the life of a college student. The authors then take a step further and provide methods of treatment and intervention. The author's final takeaway in this section and in the text as a whole is focused on providing professionals with the tools to promote student well-being outside of the counseling office. I will discuss this more in my biblical appraisal, but basically, the authors make note that only so much healing can happen in a person while in the office of a counselor. The student will need to be equipped to face the world on their own and have the tools to successfully transition without the constant aid of a mental health professional. The authors gear this text towards college counselors and those who would be working with mental health issues of college students. There are also several notes for students in higher education and counseling programs about how to utilize the resources for practical purposes. I personally believe that this resource should be utilized by any professional planning to work with college students closely, such as student affairs professionals, admissions counselors, or those in career services. I'm not going to dive very deeply into how this text is relevant to the college atmosphere, as the title of the text and the summary should have done so already. However, I will review briefly the relevancy. First, this text is rich with relevant, applicable information for those professionals coming into frequent contact with college students. Secondly, this text notes specific developmental challenges and needs facing college students of today. Lastly, this text highlights developmental truths that will remain applicable for college students for generations to come. In order to establish credibility of the authors, I will explain their credentials and experience. Suzanne Degas-White has her PhD and is a licensed professional counselor, a licensed mental health counselor, and a national certified counselor. She is currently employed at Northern Illinois University, where she is a professor and a chair of the Counseling, Adult, and Higher Education program. She's also the author of several works relating to college students, including Friends Forever, How Girls and Women Forge Lasting Relationships, Counseling Boys and Young Men, and Integrating the Expressive Arts into Counseling Practice. Much of her research has been focused on transitioning from adolescence through older adulthood, which is extremely relevant to college students. Christine Borzumato-Gainey also has her PhD and is also a licensed professional counselor. She is employed at Elon University, where she's a counselor, instructor, and a mental health counselor. She's also the head of the BASIC program, which addresses the substance abuse concerns of the students there. She also co-wrote Friends Forever: How Girls and Women Forge Lasting Relationships. As I read through this text, I could not stop comparing its content to that of Student Development in College by Evans, Forney, Guido, Patton, and Wren. While I searched for a comparative journal to compare the text to, I decided that the best level of comparison was to the two texts themselves. Both texts geared themselves towards professionals in higher education. They both follow similar structures and patterns, focusing on developmental theories followed by practical methods relating to college students. And they both focus on many of the same developmental theories, such as Bronfenbrenner's ecological framework, which views an individual's development with his or her own environment. This environment is broken up into a micro, meso, exo, and macro system. Another theory was Erik Erikson's stage of development and a role at the sixth stage, which is young adulthood. Both texts agree that this stage is prominent for college students as they negotiate the interpersonal conflicts surrounding the resolution between intimacy and isolation. College students are in desperate need to establish secure connections because they're in this stage. Some of the other theories included in both texts as relevant to the development of college students are Perry's intellectual schema and Kohlberg's moral development theory, among many others. In terms of differentiating the two texts, Degas-White and Borzumato-Gainey are more specific in terms of college life by breaking up the development into freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and are much more specific in their examples, while Evans, Forney, Guido, Patton, and Wren are more broad in their perspective, and it's more of the college student as a whole. The most biblical principle coming out of the text again and again is the need for counselors and professionals to equip students with the tools needed to develop rather than force them into development. A quote from the book reads, "Well-being is a multifaceted concept, resulting from educational encounters that both guide students in the search for meaning and direction in life and help them realize their full potential." The vocabulary in this text is blatant in its intention of assisting and helping. In counseling and working with students, there's a temptation to want to force students into development. It's frustrating to see a student struggling with something that we know as professionals they could easily overcome or avoid. But if you look and see what the Bible says about it, Ephesians 4:28 says, "Let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need." You've probably heard the old adage, "Give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, but teach him how to fish, and you feed him for life." The same principle is true in this passage. Counselors and professionals can and must assist students in the journey to development, but cannot do the developing themselves. It has to be done on the student's own accord. In the end, true counseling and true discipleship does not equate to enabling, but rather to equipping. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I look forward to interacting with you in the comments.